Mathematicians call this pattern the torus. The energy in a torus flows in through one end, circulates around the center, and exits out the other side. It's balanced, self-regulating, and always whole.
These toroidal dynamics are visible at various scales. One of them is at the galactic level, which are huge spinning structures with billions of stars in it. Looks like typically big arms of galaxies spinning around, and they have vortices that goes from the center out to the edge of the galactic halo that surrounds them. Stars move from this galactic disk out to the halo, down the vortices, and back out again. Stars like Arcturus, for instance, we know have done that path already. That's the appropriate description even for the atmosphere of our planet. The weather goes from the North Pole down to the equator and then back up, from the South Pole up to the equator and then back down. Even the dynamics on the surface of the sun are very similar. Of course, here we're looking at it from an external perspective on a small scale model. When you look at the solar system embedded in the galaxy, embedded in the cluster, embedded in the supercluster, we're traveling in this boundless sea of infinite torus flow.
And here is the vector equilibrium. And the related pattern of 64 that we saw encoded in the arts of so many ancient cultures. When I saw the coherence between the crop circles and the ancient encodings, I thought regardless of whoever created them and wherever they're from, there must be an important purpose to these designs. They're so coherent. I've come to believe that the pattern of the torus and the vector equilibrium, especially in the form of the 64 tetrahedron crystal, is showing us how energy works in the universe so that we can learn to align with it. I believe that they're giving us a model for accessing energy in a clean, safe, and limitless way, and a new means of propulsion. What more important message could there be to get to us, and especially now, from their perspective, as we're beginning to extend our careless reach beyond our planet? I got further confirmation of this notion when I met Dr. Jack Kasher, a former professor of physics at the University of Nebraska, who has also researched UFO phenomena. Presenting at a Sequoia symposium, Dr. Kasher showed a remarkable series of drawings by a woman named Lane Andrews, who claimed to have been invited onto an extraterrestrial spacecraft. I was startled to see her detailed sketches of the toroidal energy field that she said propelled the vehicle and protected the passengers. I subsequently interviewed James Gilliland. James has many hours of UFO footage from his ranch near Mount Adams in Washington State. He also claimed to have gone on board an alien spacecraft. What blew my mind was that he had never met Lane Andrews and had no knowledge of her experience, Yet he described a phenomenon that was amazingly similar. Numerous ships with spinning rings of light. Could it simply be coincidental that James and Lane described the same torus dynamic, and that both of these people have been harassed extensively by government and military agencies? To some, the idea of UFOs may sound crazy, and yet from another perspective, it is completely plausible.
And I made a spiral. And the reason I made this a spiral, because the research on the myofibers of the human heart, there are 8 layers. And there is an illustration of those 8 layers that you will see of the myofibers. And you will see that the myofibers go around and tuck into here. And so what this is a vortex. Look, and there's one on the back too. So what I decided to do, well, let's see how this all works. So if I take and start to make the cone, and I paper clip it together like this, that is 22.5 degrees, which you saw when I did the plastic. So if I roll this around like this, I will get 4 layers when I come to the middle or the end of the first circle. And where's the end? Right there. See that line right there? That's the end. That makes 4 circles. It makes 4 cones. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, that's great. So now what I do is I take the other end and do the same thing. So I'll put the paper clip here. It doesn't unfold. There's the midpoint. In other words, this will make 1 circle. Look at this. Make sure that this is lawful. See how that makes 1 circle? Okay, so what I do is I'm going to roll this around, do the same thing. Put a paper clip here to hold it together, and as I go around, I now have 2 cones, 4 each. 1 for the red and 1 for the blue blood. But that's not the way it is. This has to be inside there. All right. So if I cut this, I can put this cone, I can put it in here. But then it just slips right out. That's the heart. Heart is really, really combined. So I kept looking at this and looking at this and looking at this, and what I found out was that all I had to do, okay, was to do this. I take this paper clip off. What I did now, I just rolled it, continued to roll in the same direction. And so what happened was, I got an 8-layer cone at 22.5 degrees. The answer to the myofiber problem. So what's happening here is that the same thing you saw on the bell. You saw an angle of the bell that was running this way, and you saw strings running this way. Okay, so when you look at the human heart, the outside of the heart, okay, the myofibers go in the top to the bottom, like this. So as you undo it, okay, the more you undo it, the less the angle is created here. So you notice how it's getting less an angle? And then, when you get to the middle, it's straight across. So now what has to happen is that they have to go from the bottom up in the opposite direction. So let's happen. If we continue to go, let's see what happens. They're still pretty flat, because that's the midpoint. Now look what they're doing. They're starting to go up in the opposite direction. And now look how much steeper they are, completely opposite, like the bell. The lines are completely the opposite, and there is the last cone is completely opposite. That's a major discovery about the human heart.
It turns out that scientists as far back as the early 1900s have been developing alternative ways to access electricity without combustion. Nikola Tesla believed he had tapped into what he called radiant energy. Many scientists believe he was accessing what's now called free energy. A modern-day inventor, Adam Trombley, was inspired by Tesla's work and by the possibilities of the torus. Trombley built a dynamo, a direct current generator that accessed electrical power right out of the air.
So when we contemplate nature, when we contemplate Jupiter, or we contemplate a dynamo like the Earth rotating in space, we're basically talking about a magnet which is rotating in space. And the lines of flux of the magnet are pouring down and through in this toroidal pattern of the magnetic field. It's also expanding and contracting. It's breathing. It's taking in the energy of space literally and transforming it. Right here in this toroid, we have enough energy to transform the entire Earth.
People are fascinated by Egyptian monuments, and some report the energy is palpable at these sites. Is it possible to confirm this energy through scientific means?
What I've been finding the last 20 years of research, a lot of experiments have been done that show that there's a certain type of energy that does not exist in our current science. It's unknown with our current science. We call it subtle energy.
Well, this is a whole new trend of thought in looking at ancient structures, that maybe the ancients understood subtle energies.
So this appears to be a technology that may have existed in megalithic societies. You know, these societies that built things out of big stones.
It makes sense that you could motivate an entire population to invest so heavily in building these structures, I think. And I don't mean to say by any means that this is the only purpose of the megaliths, but I think it's pretty clear that it's at least one of the primary or one of the important purposes for building these structures.
We find megalithic sites everywhere around the world, and there's a tendency to make circles or certain types of formations.
Megalithic sites occur all over the world. Is their placement random, or does the location of these sites reveal yet another hidden layer of ancient knowledge?
One thing I found looking at different megalithic structures over a few continents in numerous places around the world, overwhelmingly these places, the pyramids, the Stonehenges, etc. of the world, were placed on ground where an unusual type of geology naturally concentrates the regular daily natural electromagnetic fluctuations that occur everywhere on the Earth each day.
You go into England, for example, the ley lines that cross England, the Michael line, which is hundreds of miles long, that crosses England, that carries this energy along that line.
It will therefore generate electric currents in the land called telluric currents in the straight geological sense of that word. And those occur everywhere on the planet.
We know that this ley energy, this subtle energy, passes along these lines.
There are certain special types of geology that will magnify those several-fold. And that's where we found the megalith builders preferred to put their monuments.
And typically where lines cross, where you have more than one line intersecting, temples were often built.
These are called conductivity discontinuities, which sounds highly technical, but it's merely the place where one area of ground that has a good ability to conduct electricity meets another area of ground that has a lesser ability to conduct these natural electric currents.
The Chinese had the same tradition. They call them dragon lines. It was illegal for a commoner to be buried on such a line. A king had to be buried on such a line. They put palaces there. There's a whole series of sacred sites. They're always built on lines like this.
I want to say in this area about the location of temple. You have to have symbols appear on the ground. When it's seen, then this is the place where people naturally come to get more healthy energy from that spot. You know, energy pumps from the earth.
And it appears as though they were attempting to control the flow of this energy and use it for their own purposes.
Granite is a transmission stone. It's not dead stone, it's alive.
So you have these sealed shafts with granite linings, and I wonder if it wasn't designed to keep an electrical charge present in those shafts. They were built exactly like, if you will, an insulated wire, only more so because you've got all the charge in the ground that's spread across the base, concentrated all the way up into this tiny spot at the top.
We find similarities in three different constructions. The one at Giza here, Valley Temple, and one at Abydos, and another one abroad in England, the Stonehenge. Same material being constructed with, and same way and same technique. But the construction there, it's built in addition to have the water, because it's water bed. It's a huge water bed, and it's still working, still producing water.
In Egypt, you do have a similar situation to England in that you have limestone aquifers under the monuments.
An aquifer is an underground layer of porous, water-bearing rock. Water flows through the aquifers as rainfall, or when rivers and lakes flood, the water drains into them.
And movement of water through limestone or chalk aquifers is known to produce electrical charge by two different processes that are self-reinforcing. And I've personally measured this for a week at a stretch at Silbury Hill in England, for example. Right before and after thunderstorms, as the water is sinking into the ground, we measured the increase in ground current, the change in the magnetic field as that happened, etc. And in Egypt, you had the Nile crashing, you know, dropping every year and then flooding again. And that movement of water up and down through the layers of limestone would generate electrical charge. Flowing water generates at least a mild electrical charge, which means it generates an electric current, which means it generates a magnetic field as well. So if you were looking to give an electrical charge, a little boost to, say, a mound or something like that, it makes a lot of sense to have it at a minimum running water. And in fact, at Tiwanaku on the south shore of Lake Titicaca, their biggest monument, the Akapana Pyramid, was terraced in such a way as to have the water come down in waterfalls that alternated outside the pyramid, inside the pyramid. But that kind of falling water generates enough electric charge that one of the common school physics experiments is you can, in your own sink at home, if you can divide the stream of water coming out of your faucet into two separate streams, you can take a little LED indicator light and put it between the streams, and it'll generate enough electricity that maybe every 20 seconds or so the light bulb will come on. And then the question is, did some of those layers of limestone run up the Giza plateau? And they did, and they did, you know, come up to the surface underneath where some of the pyramids are located. The idea would be that it would be the rising and falling of the Nile that would produce this electric ground current by moving through the different layers of the limestone aquifer. And when there was a dip, say, in that supply, maybe that's when the ionized air in the granite shafts and galleries could help keep the process going, if you will. I tend to wonder if the electrified shafts might not have been able to act in a similar fashion to your car battery when you come to a stoplight. Normally, your battery is not being used when you're driving your car. The alternator provides all the juice. But when you stop and that alternator is turning very weakly, that's when you want the battery there to keep everything going so your engine doesn't cut out. So you've got this concentration of negative charge from the ground at the peak of the pyramid or mound, and a concentration of positive charge above it. And if those two become strong enough, you can start to get brush discharge, which would mean it would glow, like ball lightning, for example. It's a theory.
Nikola Tesla sought to provide the world with free wireless electricity for everybody on Earth. He discovered that electricity occurred naturally throughout the Earth's atmosphere and ground. The telluric currents in the ground that John Burke discussed, and the electricity present in the ionosphere and the atmosphere, which is ionized by the sun. He also created and developed ways to harness those energies.
Tesla, who teach Nikola Tesla to get to that power of electricity? And he didn't invent it, it's already there, but he know how to use it. And not only that, he did not take an advantage like Mr. Edison.
Tesla wanted to harness the natural energy that exists everywhere on Earth and make it free to the public. Edison endeavored to produce and distribute electricity by creating a regulated monopoly for profit.
He became rich and the people more light into their home. Yeah, so Nikola Tesla, he's the one think of how to use this energy.
Between 1901 and 1917, the Tesla Tower was built on Long Island as a wireless broadcasting system for telephone and electrical signals. Interestingly, it was constructed on an aquifer with descending passageways and tunnels beneath it. At the time, few understood how it worked. Tesla's funding was ultimately dropped by J.P. Morgan because Tesla wanted the wireless electricity to be free, and therefore J.P. Morgan couldn't make a profit. So even though Tesla's genius was seen by many, he was still driven into obscurity.
The Rainbow Project, actually, the very basic physics research started in the mid-30s. But actually, the government got interested after some successful tests were shown by the Advanced Sciences Institute at Princeton.
Institute for Advanced Study.
Yeah, Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. They showed that on small scale, the invisibility could be achieved. This was work based upon the work of Nikola Tesla, Dr. John Eric von Neumann, and others that were in the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton. At that point, the Navy realized this thing had a huge tactical application. So they backed it and they funded it. And the research was done up until August of 1943, which we're not sure is the second to the last test or the last test. But August 12, 1943, the project was installed in a ship, the Eldridge. It was a destroyer escort class, you know, not a real small boat, but not a real big battleship. The boat was built special for the Rainbow Project, where they were able to take one of the gun turrets on the front of the boat was fake. They could take it off, and they had a big opening to drop electronic equipment in, large generators, the whole 9 yards of it. And by 1943, they had already outfitted the Eldridge with all this equipment. And the boat was towed out into the harbor, the back end of Philadelphia Harbor, and the order was given to turn the project on, turn on the equipment. Duncan here and his half-brother Al were on the boat, and when they turned everything on, it worked. The boat did become radar invisible. The boat actually became physically, visibly invisible. Then it disappeared entirely. It was gone. Of course, the two Cameron brothers, one Al Bielek today was Edward Cameron back then, and Duncan Cameron, not in this body but another body, decided the party was getting too rough. So they jumped overboard. Except at that point they didn't jump into the water. They expected to jump in the water, swim ashore, and you know, get away from any rough times. But they found themselves in a vortex that the boat was in, like a wormhole in space and time, and they came out at Montauk Point in 1983, August 12th.
Hidden Magnetic Portals Around Earth, presented by Science at NASA. A favorite theme of science fiction is the portal, an extraordinary opening in space or time that connects travelers to distant realms. A good portal is a shortcut, a guide, a door into the unknown, if only they actually existed. It turns out that they do, sort of. And a NASA-funded researcher at the University of Iowa has figured out how to find them. We call them X-points, or electron diffusion regions, explains plasma physicist Jack Scudder of the University of Iowa. They're places where the magnetic field of Earth connects to the magnetic field of the Sun, creating an uninterrupted path leading from our own planet to the Sun's atmosphere 93 million miles away. Observations by NASA's Themis spacecraft and Europe's cluster probes suggest that these magnetic portals open and close dozens of times each day. They're typically located a few tens of thousands of kilometers from Earth, where the geomagnetic field meets the onrushing solar wind.
Then, in order for these sun gods to travel through space from one side of the galaxy to the other, they would have to enter the wormhole, the singularity, at the center of those black holes. So they would use stars as gateways to go from one side of the galaxy to the other. About the black hole at the center of our galaxy as the hub, the central sun, from which you can access all of the stars in the galaxy. So you would enter the sun and then through to the galactic center, out one of the arms of the galaxy, out one of the sun, in another arm of the galaxy. You look at the sunspot carefully. And I picked this one because I believe that sunspots are at the heart of the matter. When you look at it carefully, you can see that the fire is being sucked in. That's what made me think, actually, from my calculation and from my theory and all this, that the sunspots on the sun are not surface events, but they're huge vortices going to the middle of the sun. Then you could, build a ship that's able to go inside a singularity. That ship would have to have a drive at its center that's a singularity itself. Okay? And you could enter a local singularity, and because you're in singularity, connected to all things, you could come out anywhere you want, anywhere else in the universe. And you could actually follow a linear progression of that travel. Although it would only take seconds for you to go across the galaxy, you would still go through the singularity of the sun, through the singularity of the hub, and then out to another singularity that would be a solar system in some other corners of the galaxy. You could even go from the hub to another galaxy hub and then come out wherever you want there. We should be able to see these guys coming in and out. So I started to investigate this, and I found something very bizarre. I found that most of the telescope and probes that observe the sun are owned by no one else but the Vatican. The Vatican. And I was thinking, well, that is strange. What does the Vatican want with the sun? And I noticed, so I started to, kind of keep track of what was going on the sun. And I kept on downloading material from NASA, from the SOHO probe, which is a probe that's orbiting the sun. And one day, this video was put on the net. This was a while ago, almost 5 years ago now. There's been many others since then. This is a good one. Let's take a look at it. They placed this on the sun. Now this is the probe telemetry. This is the camera. And it has a little arm that has a protective lens because otherwise the electronics would get overwhelmed. And this is the sun surface here. This is a representation of the sun surface. And this is the video. So this video was placed on the net saying comets, sun-gazing comet hits the sun. And a bunch of people downloaded this stuff. And emailed NASA and said, what are these objects? Because comets usually have extremely long tails when they approach an object like the sun. Do you know how big these objects are? At least the size of the Earth. Okay? A comet the size of the Earth orbiting the sun or approaching the sun should have a very large tail, very visible tail. So, after a whole bunch of astrophysicists emailed NASA going, what are these objects you're calling comets? They retracted the video.
Gira hacia el volcán Popocatepetl captó esta imagen. Vean, está impresionante. Fíjese con mucha atención. Se trata
que se aprecian en torno al cráter del volcán Popocatépetl. La primera de ellas fue aproximadamente a las 2:30 de la mañana. Es una luz horizontal que cruza, pues, arriba.
Exhalación. Pero tras la exhalación se registró algo que no sé qué sea, no sé cómo explicarlo. Vamos a verlo juntos. Miren lo que cae en el cráter. Esta es la exhalación y luego es esto.
Interdimensional alien beings, demonic beings that are using these portals to bring things in and to take things back out. So you see there's still some little UFOs floating around up there. See, there's a couple of them over here. There you go. So yeah, that's the question, guys. I mean, no matter what, that's not normal. This is real. It's not faked. You can find this. This is on the news. It was all reported as UFO and weird light, though. Nobody reported it as a portal to another dimension.
Welcome to Space News from the Electric Universe, brought to you by the Thunderbolts Project at thunderbolts.info. NASA's IBEX and Voyager 1 missions have shattered all conventional ideas about the heliospheric boundary, the region separating our solar system from interstellar space. In 2009, the IBEX spacecraft created the first all-sky map of the boundary, revealing an astonishing ribbon of energetic neutral atoms. Principal investigator David McComas said at the time that the ribbon is still a big mystery. Our previous ideas about the outer heliosphere are going to have to be revised. Scientists expected that the outer heliosphere would be dominated by the sun and the kinetic actions of solar wind particles colliding with the interstellar medium, creating a shock front. All of the predictions of this model have proved incorrect. One of the great surprises for investigators is that the sun's magnetic field is not deflected as it passes beyond the heliosphere into interstellar space, as the standard model predicted. Study leader Nathan Schwadron says of the IBEX discoveries, "What is really missing here is our understanding of the physics." However, The astonishing discoveries of IBEX and Voyager 1 fulfill the predictions of the electric universe theory that electric currents flow along the arm of the Milky Way, powering the Sun. These interstellar currents are inseparable from the so-called open field lines of the Sun. Wal Thornhill offers an explanation of the conditions at the heliospheric boundary through an analogous interpretation of planetary nebulae.
It seems odd that planetary nebulae have been observed for decades in fine detail, and yet they are considered to be oddballs, nothing to do with other stars, because they have a beautiful structure. One of the best I can refer to is planetary nebula M2-9, and the picture there shows concentric cylinders formed by an electrical or electromagnetic pinch due to the current which is focused on a star. And if you look at that picture, you can see that these cylindrical sheaths of current close down on the star and come in at the equator. And this is precisely what's happening at the Sun. So what we're seeing out there by virtue of the IBEX mission, and now a more recent report which confirms the IBEX results, showing that high-energy cosmic rays also come from that region, is that these electric currents, as they flow in, they come in as filaments in a ring. And where the material from the Sun, which flows out in the equatorial plane of the Sun and meets those galactic currents, it acts like searchlights punching into a thin cloud. And so what we see are the spots where the searchlights go through the cloud. In this case, the electric currents punch through the Sun's plasma sheet, the solar wind, if you like. This also answers the question of why the Voyager spacecraft have not yet detected what was expected, and that is that the magnetic field would wrap around the boundary of the solar influence, and in other words, it would change direction once the Voyager spacecraft left the heliosphere. The very fact that the magnetic field has not changed direction also fits with this model, because the magnetic field traces the direction of the electric current, and here, if you look back at the planetary nebula M2-9, you can see that the current from the star travels outwards a great distance beyond the heliosphere in the same plane as the solar wind. And this is precisely what the Voyager spacecraft have found. The conventional theorists expected that what's called anomalous cosmic rays would be accelerated at the boundary also. But that was not found to be the case. And this was a puzzle too, because it's long been thought that collisions between moving plasmas would be an accelerating mechanism for anomalous cosmic rays. Once again, this shows that what is going on at this boundary is not purely mechanical. It's not a collision, it is an electrical effect.
In 2009, days after the IBEX mission reported the discovery of the mysterious ribbon of energetic neutral atoms, Thornhill published an article in which he outlined the successful predictions of the electric universe model.
NASA's IBEX, that stands for Interstellar Boundary Explorer, spacecraft has made the first all-sky maps of the boundary between the Sun's environment, the heliosphere, and interstellar space. The results, reported as a bright, winding ribbon of unknown origin which bisects the maps, have taken researchers by surprise. However, the discovery fits the electrical model of stars perfectly. David McComas of Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, Texas, wrote, "The thing that's really shocking is this ribbon. Charged particles have apparently become bunched along the ribbon near the boundary," says McComas, "but how they got there is still a big mystery. Our previous ideas about the outer heliosphere are going to have to be revised." "I'm blown away completely," says space physicist Neil Murphy of NASA's JPL laboratory in Pasadena. "It's amazing. It's opened up a new kind of astronomy." The expectations of NASA scientists are not being met simply because their shockfront model is incorrect. The boundary that Voyager has reached is more complex and structured than a mechanical impact. Now, I wrote that back in September 2006. IBEX has discovered that the heliosheath is dominated not by the Sun, but by the galaxy's magnetic field. And since the galaxy's magnetic field traces the direction of interstellar electric current flow in space near the Sun, it's a result that conforms to the electric universe model of galaxies and stars. Because the groundwork had already been laid by the electric universe model, I was able to respond to the IBEX discoveries only 5 days later. Now, here we are in 2014, and scientists are still scratching their heads about what's going on out there. The answer has been there since the early 2000s, because back in 2006, I also mentioned the fact that what would be discovered out there would not fit with the idea of a star merely ploughing like an inert object, a boat or an aircraft, through a medium. The bow shock and so on would not conform to our expectations, mainly because the effects beyond the star are parts of its electric circuit connecting it to the galaxy, and not just purely a mechanical shock front. Nathan Schwadron finishes the article in space.com by saying, what is really missing here is our understanding of the physics. He's added also that reconnection between magnetic field lines could be an example of something that changes the conditions of the boundary region. Well, magnetic reconnection is an impossibility. You cannot break and reconnect magnetic field lines. However, you can have electric currents or sudden electric discharges which will change the configuration of the magnetic field almost instantly. What is missing is the understanding that the sun is an electrically powered object, and that what we're actually delving into out here is electromagnetism, and it's the realm of electrical engineers and plasma physicists, not from standard gravitational theorists.
For continuous updates on space news from the electric universe, stay tuned to thunderbolts.info.
Some kind of way out of here.
I thought that if I assign numbers to the notes,
lying there, then what am I?
I look at you now, I don't see Gareth's race. I see an angel blazing with the light of God. Angel.